I can't believe my mom would do this again. She's walking into the house with another brand new designer handbag. My dad would go ballistic if he found out she's been spending money on purses again. My mom has a serious shopping addiction. She tries to hide it from us, but she talks to her fancy friends about it all the time. She thinks I can't hear her because I'm deaf. Well, surprise, I can. Since I was 7 years old, my hearing started to deteriorate. It's because of a rare ear disease. By the age of 10, I was completely deaf. We tried operations and treatments, but nothing worked. I had to go to a school for students with hearing and sight disabilities. It was extremely traumatic. I had to learn sign language and reading lips. Luckily, I made a few good friends. I felt really miserable. One day during break time, I fell to the ground in tears. I couldn't believe that I would never be able to listen to music again or hear anyone's voice. My friend, Rosie, pulled me to the side. She was acting really strange. "I have a secret," she mouthed. From her pocket, she took a hearing aid. "It's really powerful," she mouthed. "Give it a try." At first, I was hesitant, but what did I have to lose? To my shock, it worked. I could hear birds and cars. I could hear Rosie laughing. It was a miracle. Rosie gave it to me and said, "Keep it until you feel a bit better." I decided not to tell my parents about it. I was sure they knew something like this existed, and they never bothered to buy me one. Also, I wanted to know if they kept anything from me. That night, I could hear my parents fighting about money and purses. "I'm making all the money, and you're spending it on handbags," said my dad. "Oh, honey, it doesn't cost that much. You know that. It's all for the show." Even though it was really great to hear again, I didn't like listening to my parents fighting. But nothing could prepare me for the secrets that I would find out next. That night, my parents got all dressed up. My mom was showing off her new glittering designer dress and matching shoes. Off they went to a fancy dinner at some rich guy's house. My dad was only a small shop manager, and my mother stayed at home. Where did they get all that money from? Luckily, I was old enough and didn't need a babysitter. I watched some TV with the sound turned to full volume. Suddenly, there was a knock at the door. I got a fright and switched off the TV. The knock became louder and louder. I looked through the peephole. It was a lady. She seemed distressed. "It's Mia. Open up. Open up. They're looking for me." Everything in my body told me not to open the door, but I did it anyway. I had my sign nearby. "I can't hear you. I'm deaf." I showed it to the lady as she forced her way in. She was going on a total rant about purses and something about the police and where my parents were. She looked as though she hadn't slept in days. I guided her to the couch. She seemed harmless, so I made her a cup of tea and gave her some leftover pizza. She said, "Thank you," but I shrugged my shoulders, pretending not to know what she was saying. In a matter of moments, the lady fell asleep. She was snoring so loudly. Finally, my parents came into the house. They were arguing again. My mom said, "If you didn't give it all away, we'd be rich by now." To which my dad replied, "If you would have just stuck to the plan, I wouldn't have given it all away." Then they saw me. "Honey, you're still awake." I pointed to the sofa. My mom was completely shocked. Mia, what are you doing here?" My dad used sign language to tell me that it was my mom's childhood friend. Then he told me to go to my room. So I did. I tried to listen to my parents and what they were saying when something really weird happened. My hearing aid started to buzz. It made these strange noises like a radio tuning into a station. Was I picking up signals? "It doesn't seem like Mia will be coming out of that house tonight." I quickly jumped to look out of the window. A black SUV was standing outside. 2 men were sitting in the front. It looked like one had a hand radio. I heard them talking. "Let's go. We can catch up with her tomorrow. We don't want them seeing us." The SUV drove off. A few moments after the 2 guys left, I could see my parents and Mia walking to her car. They opened the trunk and removed 5 big black bags from it. My dad said, "We'll keep them in the safe." Did we have a safe? I never knew that. I could hear them walking to my dad's study. We weren't allowed in there. I followed them and hid behind the door. My dad moved a heavy bookcase out of the way. Behind the bookcase was a huge door with a lock pad. What could be in there? Jewelry? A few sentimental pieces? He punched in a 6-digit code and the giant door opened up. Inside was a small room. There was money stacked from the floor to the ceiling. I gave a big gasp. My mom must have heard me. She turned around, but I quickly hid behind the door. "Throw the bags in there for now. Let's sleep on it, and we'll figure out what to do with it all tomorrow." My parents offered Mia to sleep on the couch. Later that night, I heard my dad tell my mom, "We need to get rid of Mia. She knows too much." My mom agreed. What were they going to do to Mia? And what were they hiding? In the early morning hours, I heard a commotion coming from downstairs. It was still dark outside. I had to investigate. The sound was coming from my parents' safe. It was Mia. She was filling a backpack with cash. She probably cracked the code. I turned on the light. She looked at me in shock. then waved with a creepy smile on her face. I was curious to know what was going on. I asked, "What are you doing, Mia?" She looked even more shocked. "Oh, you can talk." Yes, I just can't always hear so well." She looked at me with a soft smile and sighed. "Well, come here and I'll tell you everything." Somehow, I felt sorry for this lady. She looked completely lost. As I walked towards her, she was putting the backpack on her shoulders. Completely oblivious to what she was planning, I moved closer. With a big push, she shoved me into the safe and closed the door. The safe was completely soundproof. I started knocking on it and kicking, but nothing. It was really tough. Luckily, there was a damp light inside. I was surrounded by cash and black bags. I screamed and yelled, but no one heard me. Then my hearing aid started to make scratchy noises again. "Where's Mia?" I heard my dad say. Somehow my hearing aid picked up the frequencies from inside the house. "There she goes! Run! Get her!" I could hear them running out of the front door, but it was too late. Mia got away. "How are we going to explain this to the boss, Stefan?" said my mom. "I have no idea. Mia was your employee." Huh? Did my mom have an employee? She is always either shopping and maxing out credit cards or watching her favorite soaps on TV. "You're going to have to explain it to him. I'm not doing your dirty work. You got greedy and now you have to pay for it." My mom stomped off to the bedroom, with my dad following her. I screamed again, hoping they'll hear me, but they didn't. I was stuck inside this safe. When were my parents going to figure out that I was missing? My hearing device went completely silent for about an hour. I looked around me. There was probably more than $1 million in cash there. The black bags were tightly closed. I was so curious to know what was inside. Just as I was about to open one, the weird buzz sound appeared again. Someone said, "Mia's car isn't here anymore." I say we pay those two a front door visit. What do you say? I bet it was the two guys in the black SUV again. Through my hearing device, I could hear the two guys barging into our front door. My mother screamed in horror. "Where's our merchandise? We want it now," the guy said demandingly. Okay, Stefan, we got it. Come with us," my dad said calmly. This guy was Stefan, the boss? I could hear them moving towards the study. Thank God they were going to find me in here and set me free. I could tell they were standing outside the safe's door. "We want everything that Mia made. You hear? Don't think that you're going to trick us. Show us the stuff." I could hear my dad guiding the two guys to the safe. At this point, I was really panicking, so I just decided to hide behind the bags. I quickly moved them around. My dad opened the safe and pushed the two guys into it with me. I shrieked when one of the guys stomped onto my foot. It all happened so quick. Before I knew it, my father shut the safe again. It was me and the two guys in there. They were screaming and kicking the door. The bags fell off my body. They didn't even notice me. Then I yelled, "Stop it!" I don't know what came over me, but I was tired of being ignored, and I wasn't scared anymore. The two guys got a big fright. I've never seen two grown men more scared in their lives. They must have thought that I was a ghost. I said, "Shut up." They fell completely silent and fell to their knees. I could hear my parents through my hearing aid again. "Stefan won't be happy with the amount of merchandise we have for him. He wants more and we can't keep him locked for long," my mom said. "Without Mia, we can't produce anything. She's the only one who could copy that exactly." What were they talking about? Then it hit me. The merchandise is probably inside these black bags. The two guys stared at me as I tore open the black bags that came from Mia's car. One of them even started praying. He really thought I was a ghost. I went, "Boo!" and he gave a shrill scream. As the secret was finally revealed, it was a bunch of handbags made with shiny stones and beautiful fabrics. Stefan and his friend's eyes were wide open. For the first time, I understand my mom's obsession with designer bags. They were truly magnificent. Stefan broke his silence and asked, "Creature of the night, where did you find these handbags?" Everything finally made sense. Mia was the one who made knockoff designer handbags. My parents probably sold them to Stefan, who then sold them on the black market. They were complete fraudsters. I could hear my mother say, "We have to let them out now." I decided to take matters into my own hands and played along with their illusion. I put on a ghost voice and chanted, "Mia, she's the one. Leave these people alone. Never come back. Promise me. Promise." The two men were nodding their heads and shaking. At that moment, my mother opened the safe's door. The two men rushed out of the safe screaming. My parents didn't even notice me. They ran after Stefan. They were probably in such a state of shock that they left the safe's door open. I could finally escape. As my parents closed the front door, I pretended to have just woken up. "Hello, honey. Did you sleep well?" they hand-signed. I nodded yes, pretending to rub the sleep from my eyes. I never told my parents that I heard all their secrets through my powerful hearing aid. And that Monday, I asked my parents if I could get this kind of hearing aid, but they said, "It's too expensive." I couldn't believe that they lied to my face. I knew how much money they had hidden in that safe. At school, I returned Rosie's hearing aid. Perhaps it was better that I didn't know about my parents' secret fraudulent business. Or maybe I should take some money from the safe without them knowing. and buy the hearing aid myself. Either way, I've learned a lot from this experience.
Hi, I'm Annie, and I can't recall a single moment of my life without being with my sister. My sister Emily has been sick since she was a child. Even though our family can afford a full-time caregiver for her, I was the only one who took care of her. You might be wondering why my sister could just drop down and die if I left her side. Well, she has chronic kidney disease and severe anemia that requires constant blood donations, and the only person she can get that blood from is me. I'm surprised I've got any blood left, to be honest. And let's not get started on the number of times I've fainted. But I never complained about it. Not once. Emily is my best friend, and I would do anything for her. But sometimes it was a bit weird, because to put it bluntly, she was my only friend. I don't even know what it's like to have friends. People thought that we were weird. Like that first time I took her to a support meeting. I was holding her hand nonstop, and when she stood up to introduce herself, I stood up with her. I heard someone whispering that we looked like a couple, and the others started laughing. After the meeting, we went together to the toilet, and the same people were watching us. "She's my sister, all right?" I shouted. When I looked at Emily, I noticed she was crying. My sister was very sensitive. That night, I hugged her and promised that I would never leave her side no matter what. The next week at our meeting, I left Emily to go to the bathroom for 1 minute. But on my way back, I got the fright of my life. My sister had disappeared. I started screaming her name. Everyone looked at me like I was insane. But suddenly, I saw her body lying on the floor in the next room. Was she dead? Ben, the guy in charge of the meeting, was sitting with her. He told me to relax and that she was okay. He called an ambulance and said it was on the way. It took us to the hospital, and he came along. Ben was very sweet, actually. He waited in the room with me and never left our side. The doctors told me that my sister's blood pressure had dropped and that she can be released in a couple of hours. Ben invited me for a cup of coffee while we waited. He then asked me, "So what's the deal with this weird relationship that's going on with your sister?" I didn't feel like answering his question, so I put my head down and tears started running down my cheeks. Then I felt his hand touch my chin. He lifted my head up and dried my tears. He said it was okay if I didn't want to discuss it, and he just gave me a hug. He cheered me up and we started chatting about random stuff. He was actually very cute, and before I realized it, he was flirting with me. And I kind of liked it. I felt him leaning in like he was about to kiss me, but then I heard a voice shout, "What do you think you're doing, young lady?" Ugh. It was my mom. I was surprised that she remembered she had a sick daughter and came to check up on her. I told Ben that I'll see him later to save myself the embarrassment, and I went with my mom. She seemed more upset about seeing me with a boy than the fact that her other daughter was in the hospital, but I was used to it. For some reason, I wasn't allowed to date, and my parents were very strict about it. After that, I thought about Ben the whole week, and eventually I couldn't take it anymore. I Googled his name, found his number on the chronic kidney disease support website, and texted him. I had to do it when my sister was sleeping, or otherwise she'd ask who I was texting. I hid my phone under my pillow and waited for a reply. I could barely contain my excitement when I heard my phone buzzing. We started texting back and forth, and he asked me if we could meet for a proper date. I so badly wanted to say yes, but I couldn't go without my sister. But then he said he'd make a plan. So at the next meeting, there was a guest speaker, and Ben asked me if I could help him prepare some tea and cookies for everyone. My sister said she'd be okay, and so that's how I found myself alone in a kitchen with Ben. The moment we were alone, he didn't wait and just leaned in and kissed me. I felt like I was in a dream. We started talking, and I felt like I could open up to him. I told him about my situation, what my parents had taught me, that sisters should be there for one another all the time, and how that's the only way I know how to live. Ben just looked at me and said, "But what about you? When do you ever do anything for yourself?" But I couldn't reply. I had never truly thought about myself before, because thinking about myself felt selfish. The following day, I woke up to some bad news that shattered my world. My sister was transferred to the hospital, and the doctors told us that her kidneys were not responding to the medication anymore. One had completely failed, and if she didn't get a donor ASAP, she will die. I sat there holding her hand, sobbing. Our parents, on the other hand, smiled calmly and said, Why, we already have a donor. Annie will happily oblige and give her sister one of her kidneys, won't you, dear? They went on and asked how soon it could be done. I was gobsmacked. They didn't even ask me. For all I knew, they might have signed me up for a complete organ donation. Sure, doc, take my kidneys. Take my liver. What else do you need? My mom wasn't even looking at me. She just asked what I needed to sign and when they could schedule us in. But the doctors stopped them and turned to me and said, Annie, is this okay with you? Do you agree to this? My mom butted in and said, yep, of course she agrees. And then I just lost it. For the first time in my life, I stood up and shouted, no, I don't agree. I don't agree at all. You never ask me what I want. Then I stormed out of there, shaking in a fit of tears. My mom shouted after me that I was a selfish brat, but I didn't care. That was the first time I'd really left my sister. And I almost turned back to get her, but I wanted space. Actually, I wanted to see Ben. I called him and asked if we could meet. I didn't even look back to see if my parents were coming after me. I met Ben at a cafe and told him everything. On the one hand, I wanted to save my sister's life, but on the other hand, what about my life? It felt like all I did was look after her. Ben said he'd never come across any case like this before, and that my parents weren't treating me right. He said he felt suspicious about it all. He started asking about how my parents treated me when I was a kid. I told him that I thought they were like all other parents, super strict and not particularly interested in me. Then I mentioned that they never even kept any photos of me, that I'd looked, but only found photos of my sister. He said that something seemed wrong. He's been working in this field for a while and he never encountered such a weird family. He said he could look up my sister's files and find out what was going on. I asked if I could come with him because I didn't want to go home. Well, I was in for a shock. He looked up my sister on the records and then said something weird to me. Annie, your sister's file shows no sign of her having any other siblings. It's like you don't exist on her records. You're definitely related, right? I assured him we were, but then he looked in my records, and from the expressions on his face, I knew something was wrong. Annie, it looks like you're not her biological sister. You're adopted. I couldn't believe it. That had to be a mistake. All I knew was my family. I had no memory of being anywhere else or living with any other parents. I felt like my world was crumbling around me. He showed me my file, and sure enough, 17 years ago, when I was a 1-year-old, I was adopted. I wanted to puke. How could my parents lie to me all these years? Ben drove me home, and as I walked up the path, my mom came running out and asked where the heck I'd been and said my sister needed me. I just waved my file in her face and said, explain this! She wanted to eat. Then, the truth came out. After she gave birth to my sister and realized she was sick, they decided it was too dangerous to have any more children as both their genes meant that their kids were at a higher risk of having a chronic condition. So they decided to adopt a baby so their little girl wouldn't be all alone in the world. Because they were so rich and donated loads of money to the orphanage, they were allowed to choose which baby they wanted. Their only request was that the baby has the blood type of O. Ah, yes. Now the truth really came out. They adopted me to save their precious little girl's life. They'd used me all these years and didn't care if I got sick from donating a kidney as long as their own flesh and blood daughter survived. I couldn't bear to stand there another second. I ran out in a rage and my sister sat crying on the sofa. Ben said I could stay with him and we could even file a report about my parents. I was so angry, but all I could think about was my sister. What if she died? Was I really the only suitable donor? Now that I'd had a taste of freedom, I didn't want to go back to being with her 24/7, but the thought of life without her was unbearable. I knew what I had to do. But the following week, I got a text from my mom saying, your sister is about to die. She won't accept you as a donor. You are the most selfish person I know. So I called the hospital and asked them to pretend I was an anonymous donor and try to get my sister to accept it that way. They said she'd refused mine because she'd felt so guilty for everything I'd been through. But maybe this anonymous one would work. The surgery was set up for the next week. But then a shocking event took place. The hospital called and said that my sister's body was shutting down and that she needs the donation ASAP. I hurried to the hospital. My sister was already in the operating room unconscious. They prepared me for the surgery, and after a few hours, it was done. I asked the doctors to put me in a separate room because I didn't want her to know that it was me. The surgery left me very tired. I don't know for how long I was sleeping before I opened my eyes and saw my sister in my room, sitting in the hospital chair. It was you, wasn't it? They told me it was an anonymous donor, but I know you too well, sis. I started crying immediately. I've never been so happy to see my sister in my life. The transplant was a success, and I don't regret it for a second. Ben and I have said to my sister she can stay with us whenever she wants. And the best part, I can finally go to college knowing that I saved my sister's life. And of course, now I never have to see those nasty people who raised me ever again.